Hello and welcome to Watchbox Studios. This is Watches Tonight and I am Tim Mosso. Thank you for joining me. This evening we discuss the best men's watches for listening to heavy metal. We chat live and I share your wrist shots right here tonight on Watches Tonight. Remember to check out the homepage of thewatchbox.com, updated multiple times daily. I promise you, get started. It is as addictive as Bring a Trailer. We've got Arto Char from New York City. We've got Enrique Cassiano, John N, Decilis 2, Matt Foster, Butik 1 from Poland. You're in the wrist shots. BJ. We got Philip Lynn. We've got Alexi Simola of Finland, Thomas Burnett, Renside, Nick James, and Derek D. London. Guys, we got a big heavy metal friend since 1980 in Butik, and he is going to be giving us a running commentary to let you know whether my tastes hold up. But first, join me on Instagram, where I have over 2,000 minutes of 1-minute reviews. You can literally binge watch my Instagram, and I update daily. It's also where I post the newest and coolest stuff. Not everything from Watchbox makes it to my Instagram, just the really neat ones. Okay, viewer wrist shots. I asked, you answered. Viewer wrist shot number 1, Alvin A. from Singapore. It's been a while since he sent a wristy, but it's a good one. A shot of his Breguet Tradition 7067 After Hours. Derek W. and his Rolex Z Blue pilot a 6-speed Audi S4 in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Eric O. is at the Fortinet Championship PGA event in Napa, California with his Rolex Yacht Master Platinum Steel. Mark T. shares a timely shot of King Charles III's timepiece and the type of truck he might drive. Marvin R. impresses with his Rolex Daytona Oyster Flex and Porsche 996 4S 6-speed. 3 registers, 3 pedals. Guys, send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com, and if you have an Instagram tag, please include that with the email. Okay. Heavy metal albums and the watches to match. This is a show I've wanted to do for a long time, way outside the mainstream, but guys, stay with me. I promise it'll be worth your while. Even if you're not into heavy metal, you're into heavy metal watches. So luxury watches and heavy metal do have a lot in common, and I don't just mean that many watches are made of heavy metals. No, metal and luxury watches are connoisseurs genres that play to small crowds, inflame opinion, honor virtuosity, and often sit outside the commercial mainstream of the consumer world. Moreover, both heavy metal and mechanical watchmaking are considered heritage acts, somewhat past their mainstream prime, and devoted fans are fine with that. Here are a few of my favorite heavy metal albums and the watches that fit the rhyme scheme. Okay, starting with Ride the Lightning, a great year for metal and me, 1984, it's the year I was born, the second studio album from Metallica. Reversed to 1983, the year before, and the band's debut, 1983's Kill 'Em All, was important as a foundational document in the evolution of thrash metal, though others like Slayer were active in the same time period. Kill 'Em All was the moment when modern thrash really took form. But while historically important and intriguing due to the songwriting role of ex-Metallica and future Megadeth frontman and guitarist Dave Mustaine, Kill 'Em All wasn't Metallica's breakout moment, no. That honor goes to Ride the Lightning, which also had better box art, I'm not gonna lie. It featured both a higher level of songwriting and a better resolved sense of the band's voice. The result was a slamming 8-track assault verging on concept album featuring treatments of capital punishment, crushing depression, the plagues of Egypt, and Lovecraftian monstrosities. It was a complete statement. What watch can compare to this? Well, it would have to be at least a second attempt by its creator, and a product that better embodied the fruits of his skills. It would need to be a declaration of ability, a formidable one, a refinement of approach, and yes, hugely influential. And for the first 6 years of his practice under the Akrivia brand, Recep Recepi built watches like this, and this, and this. Not exactly what he's known for, and not what made him famous. Recep Recepi's Ride the Lightning, if you will, hit like a bolt in 2018 with the Chronomètre Contemporain. It was the result of input from collectors who he spoke to at trade shows. They wanted his name on the dial, not Akrivia. They wanted something classical, under 40 millimeters, 38 in this case. A conventional round case and simple, preferably no date, preferably 3 hands. but they wanted the same level of finish that made the Acrivia watches sizzle up close. And Jean-Pierre Hagman, famed Geneva casemaker, was so impressed upon seeing the chronomètre contemporain that he came out of retirement to work as the in-house casemaker for the now growing Régep brand. Reputedly, this watch was so in demand in its early days that people were flying their whole families to Geneva during SIHH to meet with Régep and his brother and secure a place on the newly minted waiting list, which quickly stretched to years. Ironically, and it is ironic, this is what the Régep brothers liked personally. They liked a big, extravagant, modern tonneau case. They liked size. They wanted immense complexity on the dial side. And so that's what they launched with in 2012. It would be another 6 years before they rode the lightning, so to speak, on their way to fame and fortune. So, going somewhat more commercial became a decision that made Régep a star and his watches unobtainable. And that brings us to Metallica of 1991. No, not the band, the self-titled album, a very controversial piece. No Metallica album has ever sold more copies than the 16-time platinum Metallica, also known as the Black Album. And none has ever generated more cries of sellout than this album. Keep in mind that by 1991, metal was on its way out of the mainstream as popular music, and anything heavy was becoming a hard sell as stripped-down grunge acts replaced the screaming vocals and shredding guitars of the 1980s. First, the self-titled Metallica's cover art, to be perfectly honest, was immediately reminiscent of Spinal Tap's Smell the Glove. And yeah, I see it. It didn't help. But the outburst of rage was driven primarily by Metallica's evolving sound, diversified output, and image revisions that led the band to unanimously cut its hair by the mid-1990s, and this did not sit well with the faithful. As far as thrash metal fans were concerned, Metallica and its 5 hit singles were proof positive that the, quote, Rolling Stones of metal had turned into the Beach Boys. And as far as thrash metal fans were concerned, Metallica, the album, was pop music. Never mind that the album was an impressive show of musicianship and maturity. Never mind that it helped to keep hard rock relevant in the 1990s. And never mind that it has aged with grace. Today, songs from the album play on broadcast classic rock radio. If you want to hear first 3 albums Metallica, or pretty much any other thrash metal, you're going to need a subscription to hear Ozzy's Boneyard on Sirius XM, because that's the only place you're going to hear Ride the Lightning and Kill 'Em All. But the Black Album keeps metal visible in an era when the genre can be hard to find, and for that I am grateful. Metal was never more mainstream than it was on Metallica, and yes, despite all the hate, the band is still the Rolling Stones of metal, which is why Rolex is the only brand that compares. No other brand in the watch world has more mainstream name and image recognition, and none is more heavily analyzed, criticized, and scrutinized for every decision it makes. Like Metallica, the band, not the album, Rolex has a rabid fan base that is more than just a consumer base. They feel actual ownership in the brand name. Controversial watches like 2008's enormous Deep Sea Sea Dweller, 2019's Sea Dweller Steel and Gold, and the somewhat cynical Tiffany-like Oyster Perpetual Turquoise offend self-appointed Rolex fashion police across the internet, but no matter. Like Metallica, the Rolex brand also ensures a baseline of rare quality despite its prolific success and high volume, and it keeps mechanical watchmaking visible to the general public, which is a wonderful thing for our hobby. Haters gonna hate. That's the way it's been, it's the way it's always gonna be. But just as the Black Album has introduced new metal fans to the metal genre through a more approachable sound than pure thrash, Rolex's mainstream appeal has introduced more converts to the mechanical watch hobby than any other watch brand. Plenty of people shopping de Bethune and Grubel Forsey today started in the hobby because of their interest in Rolex. Likewise, plenty of millennials and even some of the older members of Generation Z have discovered Ride the Lightning because they heard Metallica power ballad Nothing Else Matters on FM. All right, for all the claims that real metal fans hate the Black Album and that watch snobs dismiss Rolex, the truth is that both are secretly enjoyed in the privacy of their own car or their own home. Many independent watch brand snobs secretly love wearing their Submariners when no one is looking, and plenty of long-haired diehards turn up the classic rock radio when Enter Sandman starts to crank. All right, let's see what's in the box tonight. We have... this is Simon Holt saying it was Tap's Black Album first. That was not Smell the Glove. Calling Metallica's album the Black Album is a reference to Tap. They had a different source for the Black Album's cover. It wasn't Spinal Tap. There was a legitimate other reference, but how could you miss with the cultural penetration of Spinal Tap? They must have known when they made that decision. Right here we got Simon Holt, Shark Sandwich. He's another fan I can see right there. And right here, what else is going on? Boo, sir, please no load watches. Yes, we will stay far away from load. We'll avoid most of Saint Anger, Load, Fuel, New Sound, Metallica, but the Black Album is a classic. And then right here we have Boutique One saying, and the Call of Cthulhu is so monumental from this album. Very true, and although not credited, Dave Mustaine says that a lot of that was his work, and I believe him. What else is going on? We've got Amit K saying, Tim, I need a white dial watch that can be worn up or down under $10,000 and won't get me mugs. Any suggestions? Many Jaeger LeCoultre Master Ultra Thin options at that price point. You can also get a SBGK, I want to say 007, or I think it's the 007 that's a silver dial. That or the 009 from Grand Seiko, and then there is the Omega DeVille Trésor manual wind with steel case and silver dial, looking very good again in your price range right there. And what else is going on in the box? Yes, this is joining in. Hello from Down Under. Thank you for waking up early with me. All right, wrist shots number 2. Jacob O from Montana leads off. Enjoying the last week of summer 2022 with his Omega Aquaterra. Looking good. Love that dial. Mikhail B of Poland, he's in the chat box. Now he's on your screen showcasing his Zenith Chronomaster Open Boutique Edition and Renault. We love our cars. Abdul R finishes his summer on vacation in Egypt with his Rolex Explorer 2 Polar Dial and a lovely form-fit custom strap. Christopher H and his Glycine Airmen appropriately are in flight over Mount Hood. Jimmy Y starts the weekend with a feast of Korean cuisine and Tudor Pelagos 39. You're making me hungry there. Nice choice of the watch, too. I predict that's going to cannibalize, pun intended, some Black Bay sales. All right, what else is going on? Motorhead. This is roots metal right here, came roaring into the 1980s on a different course than Metallica. Frontman Lemmy's taste in rock and roll was steeped in the freewheeling rock of the 1950s. Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Jerry Lee Lewis, and an early 1960s Brit rock. Ace of Spades was a fusion of that background and everything else going on musically in rock in the 1970s. It was punk. It was metal, it was drugs, and rock and roll above all. Lemmy resisted calling his music metal, much less accepting subgenres like speed metal or thrash metal. He always said, we are Motorhead, we play rock and roll, and it was the truth. Ace of Spades was about all of the things Lemmy loved, both in fact and in concept, including gambling, the Wild West, salacious women, and loose living. That was Lemmy to a T. And aside from the title track, none of these songs have a lot of mainstream penetration, but the sound is consistently furious, and the lyrics quasi-satirical. Lemmy is having a great time here. And I should say, while he had his greatest commercial success writing songs for Ozzy Osbourne, this was probably his definitive musical statement. Motorhead never became a financial juggernaut, and Ace of Spades was its commercial peak. In terms of sales and charts, this was as good as it ever got. Yet legions of subsequent rock bands claim influence from Motorhead's work. It's clearly rooted technically in blues-based rock and roll, but it defies all attempts at easy classification, which is why the Ulysse Nardin Freak ironically occupies the fit no mold approach of Motorhead, and when this debuted in 2001, believe me, it fit no mold. Like Motorhead, the Freak never found mass market acceptance, nor did it fit any established genre. You wound it with the caseback, you set it with the bezel. The movement was a baguette that doubled as a carousel and the minute hand. It was a spectacular thing with a huge caseback mainspring, and in an era when power reserves averaged about 40 hours, this thing was 7 days. We got a lot of influence. Let's break it down. A double direct impulse escapement like the original 1801, I believe it was 1802 Breguet Natural escapement, the idea of having two escape wheels that only impulse the balance tangentially in its direction of travel. There were many later emulators of this in the modern era. They include Kari Voutilainen, Laurent Ferrier, F.P. Journe, Charles Frodsham, and more, but this is where it started in modern wristwatch making for the double direct impulse escapement. Open dial movement too, with all of the action on the front of the watch. That would become more and more common during the 2000s as all the fun parts of the watch moved from the case back to the dial. A 7-day power reserve. Again, back then, your standard power reserve would have been something like an ETA 2824 with a 38-hour power reserve if we were talking about automatic movements, a Rolex 3135 with 48 hours of power reserve, a Frédéric Piguet 1185 chronograph with 40 hours of power reserve. 168 hours back then was crazy. It was a watch you wound 1 week. And shortly after this, many brands, most of them Richemont based, but also Patek Philippe, started launching a slew of super long power reserve timepieces. And this was pioneering in that regard. We had the use of silicon technology here for the hairspring and the full escapement, and this was the entirety of all the important parts of the watch. Back when Rolex, Patek Philippe, and Swatch didn't even have this technology in a lab, Ulysse Nardin with Sigitech brought it to market in a consumer product. Case back winding and bezel setting. Not common by any means, but it anticipated later watches from the likes of Resence, IWC, Oris, and others. This thing was the watch of the modern era, and as influential in its niche way as Motorhead was, especially with Ace of Spades. All right, jumping into the box, Joseph Zamora, hello from California. Late but here, and thank you for joining me, Joseph. Saying, nice haircut, Tim. Thank you so much. Again, the metal episode should have featured more hair than this, but I've got an interview with some cool folks coming up tomorrow, and I need to look the part. What else is going on in the box? We have lots of other friends. Let me catch up with the live chat. Pete's Timepiece Safari joining in from Croatia, staying up late with me. I love it. And then right here, we've got Jean-Claude Beaver, the parody account, not the man. Turbo T2 saying the Freak is incredible, such a huge positive impact on modern watchmaking, and I could not agree more. We got Zagden saying metal and watches, you're talking my language, Tim, and I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Sean Hansen saying good relation on this one. And we have Stagecoach 420, what is the ultimate Slayer watch? That's a great question. I'm going to go with Slayer. I'm going to say it's got to be something badass, something you could wear for thrash metal. I'm going to say probably the Omega Seamaster Aquaterra Ultralight, because in the midst of furious thrash drumming, you could wear that without any qualms or reservations. Either that or one of the spring lock balls, because American roots for the ball brand, just like thrash metal, but also you literally can wear it while doing crazy things, and Slayer on stage did crazy things. We have good morning from Sydney, our friends getting up early. Okay, wrist shots number 3. Trevor E gives us a rare Parmigiani setting with his Tonda GT and a provocative backdrop, pop art Rolex. Tasty too. Craig E and his Glasuta Original CQ Panorama date are in Berchtesgaden, Germany for a historical tour. You may recognize the location from Band of Brothers. We have Marco B and his Tudor Black Bay Pro on vacation in Greece at Ithaca. We have Jason N fashions an off-wrist shot of his fascinating, logically named UK-built Kopf watch. And Tobias L drives the kid to school in his Mercedes-Benz SLK 200 with Ulysse Nardin Skeleton X. We love our UN watches here. Send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com, and if you have one, please include your Instagram handle so we can tag you. By 1991, Judas Priest's metal legacy was secure. Every member of the classic lineup was a hero forever, and the metal god Rob Halford was a living legend of the scene, as he is now. That's why Painkiller was such a shocking return to form. For legacy purposes, they didn't need this, but it was the exclamation mark on an incredible career up to that point. After Turbo and subsequent dalliances with popular sounds, I got to admit expectations were low. Judas Priest went mainstream before the 80s were over. They added things like synth guitar, more pop-oriented music that was more broadly marketable, which is why Painkiller proved that Priest spent more time internalizing the thrash revolution of the 1980s than anyone had suspected. It is a brutal 46-minute assault of speed, intensity, and epic lyric. There is hardly any filler, and roughly half the songs actually remain in the Judas Priest concert set rotation as of 2022, so it has stood the test of time. It was also a bit of a valedictory for Halford, who departed after the tour, not to return until 2005. In some ways, this feels like the Jean-Frédéric Dufour era at Zenith, after the weirdness and excess of the Terry Nataf reign of terror at the company. And yes, those are belly dancers and a hunting falcon on an artificial island in the Middle East, but I digress. From 2009 to 2014, Dufour rolled out brand-redeeming offerings like the Heritage El Primero 38, which helped to birth the modern iteration of the Chronomaster. The caliber 5011K powered chronometer Montre d'Aéronef Type 20 that reunited the brand with its observatory chronometer and pilot heritage, the Academy Christophe Coulomb Huracan with gimbal escapement, and a fusee chain constant force device. With both of these devices in one watch, Zenith returned to haute horlogerie. And the Ludwig Oxlin designed annual calendar Captain Windsor chronograph, one of my personal favorites, and of course the 150th anniversary Academy Georges Favre-Jacot limited edition, which combined classicism with high mech in a gloriously enduring package. And that was the 150th anniversary watch for the entire Zenith manufacture. It was a monumental run with little filler, and many of the hits remain in rotation in Zenith's current set list. Sound familiar? Dufour did such a good job restoring the soul and focus of Zenith that he was poached from LVMH to become the CEO of Rolex, a job he holds to this day. The Rolex of today has never been stronger. Viewer shot number 4. Stefano B. captures his lovely 2022 IWC Pilot's Watch chronograph, AMG Petronas F1. I love that Petronas teal. Derek dazzles us with his blue dial Zin 556 and sunflowers. What a way to end the summer. Luca L. introduces a fresh face, Berlin-based Philippe Pekulik, and a piece unique made for him. Here's the dial, by the way, looking good. James T. reports from Indonesia with his Arnold & Son DSTB Dead Second True Beat. Tom B. of Liverpool, England, impresses with his blazing blue enamel Anordain, a great way to get into handcrafted enamel at a reasonable price. Remember, send me your wrist shots, mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com, and include your Instagram handle. Jumping back to the box, we got Tim S. joining us from Germany, and believe me, I appreciate all the support from Europe. You guys are staying up late into the night with me. What else? We ask Sam, do you see Slipknot in Konstantin Chaikin? Maybe a little bit, but hey, Konstantin, we're waiting for a Slipknot watch. Please make that happen. What else is going on right here? We've got Pete's Timepiece Safari saying, I think Slash from Guns N' Roses wears a Breitling chronomat. I got to check that out. I know Axl Rose had a branding deal with HYT, which is fascinating, but also unwearably huge. And right here we have Bousser saying Painkiller was so brutal, death covered it. It really was a very, very heavy sound for Judas Priest. And actually, the last time we'd see Halford for a long while, really the last time too that he was able to hit those high whistle register highs, that screaming metal assault. He's not the same today. He's got the same stage presence, but not the same vocal range. All right, jumping back. What do you do if you're a storied name that's universally respected for its past, but also decades past its prime? If your German Metal Heritage Act accept, Losing an iconic singer in Udo Dirkschneider, followed by nearly a decade of professional hiatus, could have been the end of the road. Nobody expected much in 2009 when former TT Quick lead singer and American Mark Tornillo joined the band as part of its reboot. But the level of metal experience there between Accept and Mark was huge on paper. And then came August 2010 and we dropped our jaws because Blood of the Nations was a breakout and a comeback rolled into one. It was a full-blown original effort, a statement of intent, and a storming return to form for a band previously available only on aging YouTube bootlegs. I don't know what to say other than if you like metal, you'll love this. It isn't thrash, it isn't speed metal. It isn't nu metal or any recognizable modern form of metal. It's a newly conceived version of what classic metal was back at its peak in the late 70s and early 1980s. If you love Saxon, if you love Judas Priest, if you love Iron Maiden, if you love new wave of British heavy metal, you're gonna like Blood of the Nations. And let me revise, you're gonna love Blood of the Nations. Tudor in 2010 was on the same track as pre-Mark Accept, which is to say, following its early 2000s retreat from the American market, the 1990s retirement of its last component sharing with Rolex, and a number of product missteps like the Iconaut during the 2000s, the once storied Rolex relation desperately needed a new identity. So, 2 years after Accept roared out of obscurity with Blood of the Nations, Tudor did the same thing, maybe not quite from obscurity, but definitely roared back from commercial irrelevance, reviving itself and redefining the entire brand with the heritage Black Bay. And this was a seminal watch for Tudor. In 50 years, when they talk about rebranding and marketing of a company on its last legs that needs a commercial rebirth, there will be business case classes built entirely around the Tudor Black Bay. Immediately successful, the Black Bay also helped Tudor to fashion its images into a sustainable source of the type of vintage-inspired homage watches that corporate father Rolex isn't inclined to build. Rolex keeps its design consistent over time. What it won't do is a retro nostalgia watch, and that fits the modern post-Black Bay Tudor to a T, pun intended. Many versions of the Black Bay have followed. Some of them are historic homage, some of them, like the Black Bay AG925 in silver, the 18-karat yellow gold, or the Black Bay ceramic, are the kind of modern materials experimentation, the kind of modern statement of intent that Rolex is not going to do, because Rolex doesn't do sterling silver, it doesn't do ceramic, it doesn't do full titanium watches. With the Black Bay, Tudor redefined itself as a purveyor of Tudor and Rolex-inspired heritage vehicles that simultaneously keep the cognoscenti satisfied while bringing fresh blood, like Blood of the Nations, into the brand. Guys, that is my connection of heavy metal and precious metal, two things that are near and dear to my hearts, heavy metal and horology. I hope you enjoyed this journey as much as I did. Sean, thank you for the rapid fire. He made these images happen with speed metal dexterity and alacrity. Guys, thank you for joining me tonight. This was a blast. Have fun, be well, time out, Tim out, and thanks for logging on.